Hello. This video assumes that you have looked at the notes on frequency distribution. And what we'll do today is we'll take just some raw data and we'll create a frequency distribution using Excel. And if you recall from the notes, you need to have the minimum number, the maximum number, and the difference between those two. And of course the count is 66. And in Excel you can use the min, max, and then you can take the difference. And then we know that there's 66 observations because it says here, and you can multiply 6 times 11 rows. But we could also do a count of the data in case it's set up in a way that you're not sure how many there are. So if you recall, you have a couple of ways to try to figure out how many classes we should create if we want to try to categorize the information, try to condense it so that there's something a little more readable, so that we can kind of figure out the distribution, in this case of the number of alums that contributed over $1,000 to their alma mater. So one rule was to find the lowest C such that 2 to the C power is greater than this number here, 66. So you see that I plugged in 7. If I plug in 6 here, I've got the this cell here so that it uses that formula, and I only get 64. So really 7 is the first number that puts us above 66. And then you could also use Sturge's rule, 1 plus 3.322 times the log at base 10 of the count n, and that comes out pretty close to 7 as well. So if we were to use 7, that basically, if you recall from the notes, that is a starting point, and that doesn't mean we have to use 7. If I plug 7 in and I take the range 7389 and divide by 7, I get a difference of 1055.57. So that's obviously an odd number to use in terms of an interval for our classes. So should we use 1100? Should we use 1000? Well, if we're going to use 1000, then we've got to have more than 7 observations. So if I use 8 here, then I get an interval below 1000. So let's start with that. And what Excel requires us to do is create what they call a bin range. And so we're going to start with 1000. So that would say that one classification that we're going to use is 0 to 1000. And then another classification is 1001 to 2000. Okay, and so if we're going to use 8 classes, then we'll just use a bin range like that. So another assumption here is to be able to do this, you have to have the in data here, the data analysis add-in. So if you don't have that, what you need to do is go to File, Options, and just go to Add-ins. And I have it, so I have this analysis tool pack already. But if you don't, just go down here. It's an Excel add-in, so just hit go, and you click on this analysis tool pack. You don't need the VBA, the Visual Basic, just the analysis tool pack. And I'm going to just cancel out of that because I already have it. So then it would be set up in the data menu. And what you do is, now that we've created our bin, here we would click on Data Analysis and Histogram, and for the first time these would all be blank, but I've been messing with this, so but we'll pretend like this is all blank. So I want the input range, and that's all of these numbers. So it's going to take all those numbers and put them into these, the frequency of each category, 0 to 1000, 1001 to 2000, and so on. So I have to tell it the data range and then the bin range. Okay, and then we could go to a new worksheet, but I'm going to just have it give us something right here. And so it's going to create a frequency distribution, just starting at the upper, this would be the upper left hand corner of the table that it provides. Now there are these are usually not marked here, and so we need to pick one of these. Well, if we don't pick them, all we'll get is the frequency distribution table, and that's fine, but we want a couple other things. We want the chart output, and I'm going to go ahead and click on cumulative percentage so you kind of see it's close to an ogive, but it's not quite, and we'll work on that on another video. What we won't do is the Pareto. It sorts the histogram so that it puts the highest frequency first and then the next highest frequency second, and so forth. So it'll rearrange these classifications here, and we won't deal with anything like that for this class. So if I click OK, there's my frequency distribution. If you recall, I asked for the cumulative as well, and it gave us a histogram. We'll put over here, and something close to an ogive, but not quite. And I'll talk about how to construct an ogive in Excel in another video. But right now, this is informative. It shows the cumulative probability or cumulative relative frequency, and we would look at the right hand side axis here for this red line. So you can see that if we probably somewhere between 85 and 90%. Let's just see here. I guess 86.36% of all the schools have 4,000 or fewer alums that give more than $1,000. So that's helpful, but for now we're not going to mess with that. So I'm just going to click on it and delete it, and we'll just concentrate on the histogram right now. And then as you look at that, hopefully you're saying that doesn't look like a histogram to you, and it doesn't. Why Excel does this, I'm not sure, but histograms really shouldn't have these gaps in here. So we need to figure out how to get rid of the gaps. Another thing we need to do is we really need to identify these class intervals a little better. 0 to 1,000, 1,001 to 2,000, and so forth. And the other thing is, you can see that Excel has this more category that it just automatically creates. So we could have gone to 7,000 and then it would have put more here and had a 1 there. So we need to get rid of that as well. And that's pretty easy. We can just raise these up and you got rid of the more. And probably ought to just go ahead and delete that. So there's 3 more things to do here. One is to get rid of these gaps. Another is to identify the actual intervals, 0 to 1,000, 1,001 to 2,000. And the other then would be to clean up the titles here. Actually, this title is fine. So let's start with the class interval. I actually have them listed already instead of typing them out. So we've got that, and then for the gaps, just right click on the bar, format data series, and we want no gap. Okay. Now you can see one problem here is it doesn't distinguish the bars very well. So when you're in there with format data series, also do a border color and solid line, and I just typically do black, but you can pick whatever. A gradient line isn't a bad idea either. It can kind of give you a little bit of a light color. So either works. You could also do the fill as gradient fill. It's already solid, but you could do something like that. So, but again, now we're back to not seeing the lines very well. So let's make one more change here, and I'll go back to a solid color, black, and we'll go with that. Okay, so you can kind of play with it. Typically a histogram, it's the same color. When we look at some bar charts, we can look at making these bars different colors, but for a histogram we're typically looking at the same color. Now for just kind of cleaning up the titles and whatnot. First of all, we don't need, for a histogram, we don't need a legend, so we can get rid of that. This is just alums, and then this would be a histogram of the frequency of schools whose alums gave greater than $1,000, something like that. Okay, and so now we have a histogram. We could also change this to a cumulative relative histogram. We could change it to a relative cumulative histogram, cumulative frequency histogram, sorry, or a relative frequency histogram, but we'll do that in another video along with the ogive. Okay, so what we've done is taken this raw data set and created a distribution that gives us some idea of how many people are giving to their schools and the distribution. So we can see that in this case there were 16 schools that had alum that where they had 1,000 or less alums that gave more than $1,000. We had 11 schools where between 2001 and 3,000 alums gave more than $1,000. So just some interpretation like that. And again, we'll revisit this histogram. Well, the relative frequency table. We won't do the histogram. We'll do an ogive from frequency table and from cumulative frequency and relative cumulative frequency and things like that. We'll work on that in another video. If you have any questions, feel free to email me.